Welcome, Bronco Nation, to part two of the Boise State 2024 football preseason preview series. I have a fantastic guest on today. We are going to be previewing the Boise State offense. We've had some fantastic guests on this show previewing the offense. We've had Dryson James, Derek Schumann, David Michael, Grant Hendrick, Ryan Dinwiddie. But today, we have, for the first time ever, a former Fiesta Bowl winning coach on the program today. We have Mike Sanford, Boise State quarterback from 2001 to 2004, dove right into the coaching role. 2005 to 2022, 11 different programs, offensive coordinator schools like Boise State, obviously, during the 2014 season, Notre Dame, USU, Minnesota, Colorado. He was a head coach at Western Kentucky and also the interim head coach at Colorado. And then he's been recently doing some great things, the Bronco Nation News. So you guys should all be fully aware of my guest today. Thanks so much for coming on, Mike. This is going to be a great show.
Hey, appreciate you having me on. It's I follow your content. I love your content. Love what you do. You do it with such grace. I love that you always give coaches and players that are going through it in the college game the benefit of the doubt, because it's a hard world. I've lived it on both ends of it. It's never a linear path towards success. There's a lot of bumps in the road, and I think that you handle that in such a great way. So I really appreciate how you cover my alma mater in a program that clearly is very near and dear to your heart. You have a lot of family ties. And in fact, your great uncle, as we discussed earlier, was one of my favorite people to run into in the building when I was a student athlete, and kept in touch with him when I was at Stanford, and always talked to him before games when Stanford and San Jose State played in the Bill Walsh Classic. So yeah, it was, I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm looking forward to diving into this Boise State team. It's going to be a lot of fun. This season comes with, I think, some of the greater expectations maybe in the last decade or two of this program. So it's going to be fun to dive into it with you.
Yeah, that is a great breakdown we're going to talk about today. This Boise State offense has got to be one of the most anticipated Boise State offenses that we have seen in a long time. I went on Jake Posey, the Master Football channel, yesterday to talk about our thoughts on the spring game. And that's what we said. You know, we said that Boise State had a really, really golden era there, 2008 to 2011. But coming into that era, you know, they had the Fiesta Bowl win in 2006, but the 2007 season had been super special, and 10-3, lost in the Hawaii Bowl. And then the 2008-2011 season broke upon them, and it was awesome. But we've lived through that. We know what Boise State can do. And when you start looking at these pieces and you start comparing them to Boise State's past, you start seeing an offense that starts to bring about some reminiscence of that golden era of Boise State. And this has got to be the most anticipated season in Boise State history, based on what fans have lived through so far, with a little bit of a down period, and what the expectations are coming into this year. So this is going to be a fantastic video. Just kind of give everybody a breakdown of what we're going to talk about today. We'll have a little bit of Q&A like we always do with these videos, talking about, you know, Mike's career at Boise State and afterwards, and what he's doing now. And we'll talk about the Boise State season last year, just a kind of statistical recap and our thoughts on how the team performed last season. We'll talk about new players coming to the roster, some big names that you guys should be aware of for this season. Then we'll go through and we'll break down each of these position groups: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and then we'll wrap up with wide receivers / tight ends. And then we'll wrap up with a 3 keys to season at the end. So it's going to be a massive packed video, one of the ones I've been most excited about. This is going to be a great discussion. So let's just go right off the bat. Talk to us about the Bronco Nation News show that you've been doing. I mean, we're all familiar with, you know, how you got to Boise State and then the offensive coordinator trajectory, but this kind of came out of nowhere. You know, BJ says he's got a huge announcement. And the next thing we know, we've got Mike Sanford and Ball Game talking about Boise State and all of college football, and one of the greatest entrances to the incredible programming at Bronco Nation News. How did that happen? He just hit you up one day and say, hey, you bored? You want to do something? Talk to us about how that came about.
Well, you know, it's funny, Jacob. BJ's used to sending me text messages from even back in 2014 and getting absolutely no response. Because I'm horrible. I hate texting. I've never liked it because you do so much of it as a coach in recruiting. You're always texting parents. You're texting high school coaches. It's really hard to keep up with texting. And that's the first part. But the second part is that, you know, BJ was on the dark side. He was a media member. So I never would give him any intel. I think there's certain coaches that like to manipulate the media and use it for their own personal gain. I was raised in a world where it's a separation of church and state relative to coaching in the football side of the media. So BJ had reached out a couple times, knew that I just, gotten let go at CU. The whole staff was essentially fired by Coach Prime here at CU. And, knowing that I did have this potential, they call it a runway to get my next job, because I had signed a 3-year contract with CU just before the 2022 season. I was actually thinking about going into real estate. I didn't want to move my family again. I've certainly sold universities to scholar athletes and their families for years. So I knew that sales could be a good space for me. And frankly, like for 2-3 months, I just needed to get away. I just went up to the mountains and snowboarded and stayed in touch with people in the coaching industry. But the timing of when everything had happened at CU, getting right back into coaching just seemed like it was gonna be a challenge. I have 3 children. I got a 14-year-old Peyton, who's amazing. She's one of the most mature young people that I've ever come into contact with. But she's moved 11 times. And she had finally found some roots in Colorado. I love the state. My wife loves the state. We have 2 boys that are 9 and 7. And the last thing I wanted to do was move. And so in this thought of getting into the real estate world, or potentially, commercial real estate, I have a lot of connections from the Bay Area and my time at Sanford in that world that you can do very well, obviously. I just never really found my passion with it. BJ kept texting me. I think I was giving him either like non-responses or basically like, oh yeah, we'll talk about it later. But then he got wise. And if you ever want to get in touch with me and you're having a hard time because I'm really bad at it, just text my wife. And so BJ texted my wife, or maybe sent her a DM on Instagram or some place that she lives on the social media platforms, and brought it up to my wife. And so my wife's like, you should do it. And I'm like, no, I can't do this, because I have teammates that are on, like former teammates of mine that are on the coaching staff. Namely, the head football coach is somebody that I had actually been brought in the same recruiting class, in the class of 2000. And so I was like, how can I actually do this, analyze this, give my opinions, but not do it in a way that would be detrimental to friendships. And that's challenged. And that's a hard part about media. But she's like, just give it a run. And it was the very first thing I did. And then concurrently, right around the same time that I'd agreed to do it, with BJ and Johnny, and we had some talks and did some Zoom meetings to talk about how we were going to do it, what we're going to do. I also was following the Nuggets playoff run. And so I was listening to Altitude Sports Radio here in Denver, and I loved just their content. I love their personalities on air. And I was just like, I'm going to take my boys to a Nuggets Western Conference Championship game against the Lakers. We're going to go to the pregame show. And, because the Altitude Sports Radio does an on-site pregame show right next to Ball Arena downtown Denver. And I ended up getting stopped by a couple of the on-air personalities that I had known from my time at CU, that one of them, Andy Lindahl, is a sideline reporter for CU on the radio side. And he asked me if I'd ever want to do radio and even possibly TV. And so those 2 things really opened the door to something that's growing. I mean, I'm learning. I'm not a finished product by any means, but I'm enjoying it. I'm finding a lot of passion in it. And if it's anything that I can keep my family in the same household for longer than a year or 2, it'll be a big win. And that's what we're doing. It's funny, Jacob, right now, we're beginning our 3rd year of living in the house here in Colorado. And I realized that in my 18 years of coaching, that is the longest we've ever lived in one house. Wow. Even at Stanford, I was there 5 years, but we moved at one point within the time that I was there. So this is the longest that my kids have ever been in one house at 2.25 of a year. So it's a crazy life. You have a lot of family in it. But I love it. I love the impact that you can have on young people, but I also love my family. I love my daughter. I love my wife, and I want to be a good steward of being a good father.
Well, that's kind of the natural trajectory, right? You start off as a player, and then you kind of go into coaching, and then after that, you go into sports broadcasting. I mean, you're just following the natural tree right up. And I can definitely empathize with the wanting to be able to put down some roots. I mean, I've had 18 homes in 27 years, a military brat moving around. So I can definitely empathize with that. And hey, you are doing a fantastic job. I'm sure you get that feedback all the time. The Bronco Nation News Show, the Ball Talk with Ball Game. John Mallory, of course, is a great personality. He really just brings energy to anything he's part of. But your insights have been fantastic. So I 100% recommend. I'll put a link in the description. All of you should be going and subscribing to Bronco Nation News. As always, the greatest source for Boise State content out there. And make sure that you guys catch the Ball Talk show with Ball Game and Sanford. It is just incredible content. And you guys are going to have an absolute blast. That's my favorite. I love everything on Bronco Nation News, but that is my favorite show on the entire platform.
It goes by so fast. That's the cool thing about it. There's times where, Johnny or I will text before, like, hey man, I had a long day, or hey, I'll tell him I just got done coaching a high school practice, or I just got done coaching a softball practice. Let's do like a 45-minute show. And then all of a sudden I'll look down and we're at an hour and 22 minutes. And, even BJ's like, I don't really like doing anything over an hour. You lose people's interest. But, what I've learned is when you're having fun and you're engaging and you find passion, like it makes for good. Somebody else is going to enjoy it, right? If you're enjoying it, somebody else is going to enjoy it. And that's why I'm excited to be on with you. I really like the content that you put out. I like your heart. I like what you do. And so this is exciting for me.
Talk to me about coming back as offensive coordinator at your alma mater in 2014.
Well, what's interesting is that I had just gotten done really in a 3-year stretch at Stanford, playing in some of the biggest games in college football. It was the era of Oregon's brilliance and Chip Kelly and Marcus Mariota and DeAnthony Thomas and LaMichael James. And we had Andrew Luck, and we had Kevin Hogan, Christian McCaffrey. And so I was in some very high leverage situations. And so you think that you're going to frankly, just calling a spade, you're going to a place that is a step down football wise, in terms of the prestige of the program. And it couldn't have been farther from the truth in terms of the pressure that I felt the day that I inherited that job. I think the number one thing that you feel at Boise State is that there's a tremendous burden. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on the offense. It's a program that I felt like if we had 500-600 yards and we won, by 10, 14 points, scored in the 30s, it was a failed day at the office. But in every other program in America, that is it, man. Like you're going home and you have your victory cigar, you got your feet propped up. Not at Boise State. And that's because of the great coaches and players and culture that had been at Boise State for, at that time in 2014 for about 16 years. And it even predates back into the FCS days and predates back to the BJCAA, days. It's been a successful program for so long. And then it also has a local fan base where you're the National Football League team. Coaching at Stanford, you live in complete anonymity. There's nobody who knows that you're a coach, even on campus. Because the people that surround you on campus at Stanford, they're curing cancer. They're finding they're molecular biologists. They're the best of the best in every single field. Michelle Wee's walking around campus. Tiger Woods is coming, does our pregame speech. Like there's people that are on a different wavelength. So you just kind of feel like, hey man, we're just gonna be really good at what we do, but we're nothing compared to these other people. In Boise, you're the NFL team, the NBA team, the NHL team, the Major League Baseball team, and it's Boise State football. And so you feel that pressure, you feel that burden, and it was real. I think my wife felt it. She was pregnant with our second child, who's born in Boise, Gunner, and she kind of went in. I think she went and just went into a cave for that full year, just to not kind of get inundated with all the noise and all the criticism and whatnot. But it's funny, you feel like you don't have a successful day as the offensive coordinator at Boise State unless it's like clicking, everything's perfect. It's like from the very opening whistle, it's like clockwork. You got to score on the first drive, touchdown. No, you got to score on the first drive, and then you got to hit at least 2 trick plays. You got to hit at least 2 trick plays. You got to have a 300-yard passer and a 150-yard rusher. Then you're good. Like you got it. Okay. Hey, this guy's doing some good things. And at the time in 2014, do you know who like Brian Harsin and myself and Marcel Yates, we were following Chris Peterson.
Right.
The shoes that were in front of us. Robert Prince, offense coordinator, Jonathan Smith, who's now a great head coach at Oregon State, now Michigan State. He was the quarterback coach the year before I got there. So we had massive shoes to fill because of what Chris Peterson had accomplished in his entire career at Boise State as an offense coordinator, and as a head coach. So that we felt that pressure. And frankly, I think the program was in a very unique spot because there were a lot of really good players. I think that it was fun because I identified a need for the players to feel my energy, feel my authenticity, but also have fun. And I
Right.
think that that was one thing that I wanted to do in 2014. When I first got there, I think I was all like business. Oh man, you got to live up to the expectations. And I got to, there was a point, and I think it was about mid spring ball where I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to pour into these guys relationally. I want them to see the other side of me. I want them to see that I have a sense of humor. I'm not just going to be like Johnny Ball coach 24/7. I want them to see Mike Sanford, the goofball. And I think that's what that and our staff and Eli Drinkwitz and Hars was so good at pressing us forward to make sure that we never had any form of complacency. Hars is the kind of head coach where it's 4th and inches around the office. I mean, at least in 2014, I can't speak after that because I wasn't there. But within that 4th and inches mentality in the office, I also wanted to make sure there was some room for some joy and some fun with those players. And I think I started to really break through with guy like Jay Ajayi, even Grant Hedrick, Thomas Spurbeck, Matt Miller, those types of guys, to make sure that it wasn't just business all the time, like that we could have a little bit of fun too, and they could get to know me and I could get to know them on a real authentic personal level.
Well, that definitely showed through. Grant was on last year talking about Boise State offense with me, and he talked about the role that you had in helping turn that season around, the confidence that you put into him. And it was a tough start to 2014. I mean, you guys go 3-2, open up with that loss versus Ole Miss, which was, that was a tough one. I mean, I feel like the end score did not really reflect what that game was. I feel like it was much closer than the end score showed. But then you lose to Air Force, and now you're 1-1 in conference, and you're averaging 27.2 points per game, and people kind of going like, okay, is this the end of the Boise State era? And then you guys turned things around on a dime, and you go through the rest of the year. 51-46 versus Nevada, 8-0, 5 games with 50 or more points than the win versus Arizona. Can you talk a little bit about turning that season around? Having that conversation with Grant and the team and saying, okay, guys, we got to put our best foot forward. This is all we got, and how you guys did that to turn that season around in 2014.
Well, I think the thing that I had done initially when I got to Boise State is, it was my first full coordinating job. And it's a big job. It's a big assignment. And I think that sometimes like everybody's got stress behaviors, right? I think one of my stress behaviors, if you're up against some type of pressure, if you feel the immense amount of pressure, one of my behaviors is to kind of isolate, go into my office, work on things myself. I think what changed for me was after that Air Force game, having guys on that staff like Junior Adams, who's now co-OC at Oregon, Kent Riddle, who's truly one of the best human beings on planet Earth and a great football coach. Scott Huff, those guys in particular, I started leaning into them instead of just kind of pulling myself into my own doldrums in my office. And I started giving out more responsibilities, having a little bit more fun with staff, taking more ownership in, red zone. Eli Drinkwitz had the red zone. Junior Adams had third downs. Kent Riddle had protections. Scooter had, short yardage goal line, and then the entirety of the run game, handle all the protection stuff. But we just started having fun together. That's really what it was. And there was a moment there where, when you're 2-2 and you just lose at Air Force and you have 7 turnovers on offense, there's blood in the water, and sharks are swimming. They're looking, and there's in college football, everybody wants to be the coordinator, and then everybody wants to be the head coach. And, and I think having guys that I have known that I played with in Scott Huff that had coached me in, a guy like Kent Riddle, and then Junior Adams, who I just felt like was a brother from another mother of mine. Those 3 guys in particular, I think I just leaned into the relationships with those guys and made it such more of a collective effort as opposed to just feeling like I had to be, the guy that's doing it on his own. And this is the final say. We're going to do it this way. If you don't like it, that you can go in your own office. And I wasn't doing that at the beginning, but I'd say I was like erring on the side of more me and less us. And I think in any organization, I think it's a great thing to learn.
Well, you guys had a terrific end of that season. You guys won the Fiesta Bowl. Jay Ajayi had, a career year, 1,800 plus yards rushing. Grant Hendrick threw for almost 4,000 yards, rushed for almost 600 on his end. So you guys finished that year strong. Before we move into talking about offensive review from last season, just to wrap up this Q&A, can you kind of talk about that feeling being there in Arizona, 38-30? You guys have won the Fiesta Bowl. This is Boise State. They've made their name with the win versus Oklahoma. Now you guys have and the wins versus TCU, and now you guys have come back post Chris Peterson and shown the Boise State brand is still strong. Can you talk a little bit about the feelings, the emotions of standing on that field, looking back and realizing what you guys have done?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that we had been in that 2-2 moment, at Boise State. We'd had that 7 turnover game at Air Force. That's why I think there was so much joy in that moment. I remember the best relationship I had was with Grant Hedrick, because everybody was calling for Grant Hedrick's head, and frankly, they were calling for my head, and that's how it goes. It all rolls uphill, and even Brian Harson's feeling, he's feeling the pressure. You're following Chris Peterson, you're following the legend, you're following a guy that's he's gonna have a statue put up. I don't think he does yet, but does he have a statue yet outside?
No statues yet, but the plans are in the works. They're going to get Kellen Moore as their first one. They're going to put a statue up eventually, maybe as part of that new stadium expansion eventually. And then I'm sure Chris Peterson's down the road.
Yeah. So I think it's just the time to look back of the journey we went on in such a short period of time. That I put my trust in Grant. Coach Harsh put his trust in Grant and me, and we went and we all just got into the foxhole together, and it was a whole lot of fun. It was hard. It was a hard journey, but it was a really fun journey. And it's crazy to think that's 10 years ago.
Right.
And it's also crazy to think that's the last New Year's Six bowl game that Boise State's been at. And it's been 10 years. There's times where I think it's just 3, 4, 5 years ago. I mean, I've lived in an entire lifetime, it seems like, since 2014. The craziest thing is that I was starting to get some notoriety. I was getting noticed by head coaches in power conferences for jobs. And at the Fiesta Bowl, that was a tremendous distraction. I had people contacting me about jobs that were already either going to be opening up or circulating. And I didn't really know how to go through that. I'd never been a guy in demand like that. But I think it was more Boise State that gave me that opportunity. It was the players, it was Jay Ajayi, it was Grant Hedrick, it was Harsh, for keeping us moving in the right direction. And most importantly to me, it was the guys in that room, in that offensive staff room in particular. So yeah, it was a wild time. And not only that, we had a newborn. My son was born during the season. We had our second child. My daughter was 4. We had a newborn, and we didn't know how much was going to lie ahead in terms of just family and life and moving and football. And it was an interesting pivot time for me because I could have stayed at Boise State, obviously. And
Right.
After that season, I ended up having, I think it was close to 4 or 5 Power 5 opportunities to be coordinator. And
Wow.
I said no to all of them. And then about a month later, after I'd said no, and one of them was Ohio State, about a month later, there was an opportunity to go back to a place that was really, really close to my heart, and that was Notre Dame. And I said yes to that one. So yeah, that's and it made my career kind of get into turbo boost mode.
Right.
But it also there's a lot. Just as fast as you can rise, sometimes you can also fall, and that's part of the great aspects of life and the journey of life and learning and growing. And I'm definitely a different person today than I was 10 years ago.
I love that you just said that you passed down Ohio State, because when Boise State was going through that 2014 season, my dad was stationed in Ohio. I was playing on a football team in Ohio, and I'm this Boise State military brat Boise fan in the locker room that they're all Ohio State fans, and they were giving me so much crap that season for being a Boise State fan, especially when they started off 2-2. And I was talking about Boise State's a great team. They're a Power 5 trapped in a Group of 5 conference, all this stuff. And so to know that you turned down a job at the Ohio State University, that brings a lot of joy to my heart, a lot of bringing things together there. I really like that. Well, you talk about the last Boise State Fiesta Bowl win being 10 years ago, and it has been 10 years. It's been a little bit of an up and down journey since that time, but Boise State seems to be headed on the right trajectory upwards. And we're going to talk about the 2023 offensive stats. And that was a little bit, again, of an up and down journey where Boise State turned things around and started moving towards what could be setting Boise State up to maybe break that era, that decade of of not competing at the highest stage with the first year of the expanded college football playoffs, this could be that year, 10 years later, that Boise State gets a chance to finally get back on the national stage. So let's shift gears from the Q&A. Fantastic Q&A. Thanks so much for being part of that. Thanks, everybody, for listening through that. Mike always brings a great perspective, and he has some great stories to share, and he'll have some more throughout the rest of this preview as we talk about the Boise State offense. But let's shift gears to talking about the Boise State 2023 offense and just a little bit of review of what happened last season before we really shift to focusing on 2024. So 2023 offensively for Boise State, obviously 8-5 record-wise, but offensively they weren't bad. They scored 32.1 points per game, which was they were 27th in the nation in that category. And that was an increase from 2022 when they scored 29.4 points per game. They had 10 games where they scored 30 or more points, including 3 games with 40-plus points in their last 5 after the coaching change. They had 54 total touchdowns, 31st in the country. And that was also an increase from 2022 when they had 44, and a dramatic increase from 2021 when they had 39. So upward trajectory in all of this. Their third down efficiency, again, wasn't bad, 45.96, 17th in the country. And that was, again, an increase from 2022 when they were close to 39%. They had 3,098 yards passing, which was good for 65th overall, 221.3 yards per game. They had 3,008 rushing yards, which was 6th overall. I mean, 6th overall in the country, 3rd highest of the group of 5. So let me say that number again. 3,008 yards rushing. They averaged 214.9 yards per game. The only group of 5 teams that were ahead of Boise State in rushing yards were Air Force, which, that's option team. That's all they do is rush. And Liberty University that had that crazy Jamie Chadwell offense and a really, really easy schedule as well. So Boise State, they put up a lot of yards and a lot of points. It didn't end up converting into wins, but there were some other things going on. What were your impressions of last year's offensive production for Boise State?
Yeah, exactly what you said from the standpoint of it felt like there were almost mini seasons within the season. It was an interesting start to the season because starting out against the University of Washington, which I just checked had 8 guys drafted.
Yeah.
It was a pretty significant number. And starting out at University of Washington against one of the best offenses and frankly, one of the best defenses in college football, as a group of 5 team is a tough way to start the season. But then you started to see, some signs that this Ashton Jeanty was going to be something that this program maybe's never seen before. He's different. And, I think it was interesting because Bush Hamdan was a first-year coordinator at Boise State, as we all know, no longer at Boise State. But, I think he was also trying to kind of figure out the personnel, where the strengths lied, especially with what had happened the year before with the quarterback situation and, with, frankly, an offensive coordinator in 2022 being relieved of his duties after 4 or 5 games into the season.
Yeah.
And then Dirk Cutter taking it over and using some of the same terminology that Plow had been using, but then bringing back some of the staples that had been in the Boise State offense for decades. And so I think there was a feeling out process that I fully understand. I've been a part of that a long time. And while Bush Hamdan has been intimately involved with this program as a student athlete, as a guy that's been on Chris Peterson's staffs, there was a figuring out about just the state of the program, the state of the offensive terminology, certainly the state of the personnel. And I think it became aware to me. I became aware as the season progressed that Bush was starting to lean into what he had discovered, that this strengths of this team were the trenches. This offensive line last year, I think people early on in the season kept jumping in on ball talk in the comments and talking about the offensive line. So I didn't really know what to make of it until I went to the Colorado State game. I was at the CSU game, which clearly was an absolute hard day to be a Bronco fan in a lot of ways. But I sat right at midfield. I was actually sitting with some CSU boosters that are friends of my family's here since we've been living in Colorado. I had my Boise State stuff on clearly, but so I was right there, two rows up, 50-yard line, and I saw the offensive line. I said, "That's one of the best. That is the best looking offensive line that I've seen in Boise State history." And I've kept up with the program. I coached there in 2014. I love their body types. They had athletes. They were long. They were powerful. And then I saw Ashton Jeanty, and I was like, yeah, that's different. And that's the thing that really stuck out to me at that point in the season, which frankly became a turning point just randomly that I was there, because I think it was a couple weeks later that, Coach Andy was relieved of his duties, and it seemed like there was just a light switch went on. Taylon Green became the starting quarterback. The threat of Taylon Green as a runner really complemented Ashton Jeanty to really soften up the edges. And I just thought that it became an offense that was playing bully ball and, was throwing the football as well, but really leaned into its strengths. And that's what I think, Bush did a really nice job of last season en route to a conference championship. And, there was a point in time there before the New Mexico game where I was like, this is critical time right here. You could, after losing to Fresno State, you're going into New Mexico. They're obviously not a great football team, but if the confidence isn't there and you have some, just bad vibes around the building, I've been a part of them. This could be the first losing season in decades at Boise State. And just to watch the transformation of even just the identity as an offense to really lean into the running game, I thought is why Boise State ultimately won a conference championship.
Yeah, that offensive line for Boise State last year was very, very impressive. I said that it was the most improved unit over that season, but also over the last 3 or 4 years at Boise State. Really starting in 2019, and I don't know where the disconnect happened, but at some point, starting around 2019, Boise State's offensive line production started to go down. It was really noticeable in 2021, but you started seeing signs of it in 2020 as well. And yeah, Andy Avalos, obviously, that whole thing didn't work out, but you got to give him one thing credit-wise. He did an incredible job of rebuilding this Boise State offensive line. He did a lot of good things here in this program as well, but there's one thing that he left his mark on that's going to pay major dividends down the road, is that he rebuilt this Boise State offensive line and put us back on a course to being able to compete with the weapons that we have, especially if they're under the correct management. The last 2023 question before we move into 2024 was the two quarterback system. Boise State last year did something that really perplexed fans. They just couldn't seem to make up their mind when Taylon Green and Maddox Madsen went back and forth, whether it was towards the end of games or whether it was just straight up throughout the whole game, splitting series or even in series. What happened there? Was that a politics kind of thing? Like you gotta try, you want to move to Maddox because you're Taylon's struggling, but you got to stay with Taylon because otherwise he'll transfer. Was it maybe just a little bit of inexperience with the play calling? Was it maybe just efficiency? Like honestly, that was the best way to go. Like what happened last year to push Boise State towards something that really, really perplexed a lot of fans?
Jacob, I think that's the $10 million question, man. I really do. The why of how that all went down and how that transpired. And I still to this day haven't heard. I don't know. I didn't really dig on it too much just because, it ultimately cost one of my teammates their job. That's the bottom line. And that's what happened. It's a really unique, it was a unique scenario because I kept watching it and I'd watch the games, and I've never really had a chance to watch college football games because I've always been preparing for a game myself.
You've been on the sidelines.
Yeah, I've been on sidelines, or I've been in the team hotel in a walkthrough. And so I was watching the totality of all these games. And even I was trying to figure out the exact why of the rhythm of when the rotation was happening.
Right.
And it was different than anything I had ever been associated with. And what it kind of looked like it was starting to morph into was that if they were in gotta have it throwing situations, they pulled Taylon off the field. And there was a game that happened. I can't, did that end up being the Central Florida game where like at the end of the game, it was a pretty, it looked like an injury, but really Taylon looked fine. And then there was maybe some body language reading of like, he's okay. And then they had to kind of get in 2-minute mode. And now Maddox is the guy that can throw the football. That's hard because on a couple fronts, I mean, that's these quarterbacks, the era that we live in right now in the portal, the era that we live in with the NIL, I think there's never been a more important time to consider the confidence of your quarterback when you're making big decisions. And that was ultimately, I felt like until Spencer took over as the head coach, it just looked like Taylon had kind of lost his confidence. How can you not? When you're a quarterback and your primary job is to throw the football, move the chains, create explosive plays through the air, if your coaching staff is telling you that the other guys are thrower.
Right.
That
Yeah.
it's an inevitability. And so I can't fully wrap my mind around why it all went down. But once it all played out when Spencer took over, it also concurrently happened with Maddox Madsen getting injured and having a season-ending surgery. The confidence level of Taylor Green seemed like it was back to being sky high, which was similar to the end of the 2022 season, where he was playing really confident football. And that's one thing I think Dirk Cutter did a really good job with in 2022. I didn't have a chance to watch a lot of it because I was coaching CU. I was an interim head coach, fighting for my football life, literally. He played to the strengths and the skill set of his quarterback, and that's one thing that I saw. And I think will ultimately happen whoever wins the starting job in 24.
Well, let's talk about these 2024 newcomers. Let's talk about Malachi Nelson. Let's talk about some of these other guys that stand out to you. This is not going to be a full breakdown of the 2024 class. There's great episodes on Ball Talk which break this down more in depth. I did a preview of the Boise, or a review of the 2024 signing class with highlights and analysis of all these guys. So definitely go check out that video. I'll put a link to that in the description. But this is just going to be some of the guys that stand out to us. And let's talk about Malachi Nelson. 4-star transfer, former 5-star high school guy, Gatorade Player of the Year, from transferring from USC. In high school, he put up almost 8,000 yards passing, over 100 touchdowns, and now he's coming over to Boise State. We have never had a player that reaches this star caliber. Talk a little bit about how this happened and what this means for Boise State to have a guy like Malachi transfer to our program.
Well, first, Malachi Nelson is a little bit more famous and a bigger entry into the Boise, Idaho community than Mike Sanford was from Los Alamitos back in 1999, 2000, just to get that out there. But, I think Malachi Nelson grew up in Southern California, grew up with quarterback training, has a tremendous throwing process. I mean, he's a great thrower of the football. He's got the height. He was surrounded by incredible talent at Los Alamitos. Yeah, but really since his freshman and sophomore year of high school, I mean, this guy's recruiting profile is fairly massive. So he's had almost like this star that, almost like a spotlight has just followed him throughout his high school experience in Southern California. And even now with the advent of the NIL world, that was already starting to play into his recruitment, which it was for these types of players, the caliber of player that Malachi Nelson is. And I think ultimately, Malachi Nelson chose the hometown school, USC, and you can understand why. Lincoln Riley's a guy that has multiple quarterbacks that are starters in the National Football League, multiple quarterbacks who've won the Heisman Trophy. Got Caleb Williams, who was inevitably going to be the number 1 pick overall in the 2024 NFL draft. So it just made too much sense. But I think Malachi got there, and it wasn't everything that he probably thought it was cracked out to be. Being the 5-star recruit going to the 5-star West Coast program. And I think that he saw that the way it all transpired, Miller Moss was going to end up being the quarterback as it appeared in that bowl game that USC played. I think it was a Holiday Bowl. It seemed like the team just rallied behind Miller Moss. He looked fantastic. He's a guy that I actually was going to try to get in the portal if I had gotten the head job at CU because I loved him. He played against us the second half, of course, CU versus USC. But and I think it's just opportunity. It started, the portal world now is, if you're a big time recruit and you're regarded highly, that you need to immediately look for an opportunity. If that opportunity after, going into your second year isn't there for you, you got to go look for the next one. But I think that he wasn't just looking for the biggest opportunity. I think he was looking for an opportunity that fit what he learned about himself at SC. He's not necessarily the guy that wants to be in Hollywood. He's not the guy that wants to do all the commercials, doesn't want to be, front and center in every media, type of dialogue that Caleb Williams had to be in. So I think Boise was a type of place that if you're in Southern California, the program certainly has a ton of respect, but it seems like a good place to go to make a niche for yourself, to grow into the role, as opposed to having that same spotlight follow you around in a city like Los Angeles, which has got the bright lights of Hollywood, right up the street from the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. So I think Malachi was looking for that type of place. And I think he was also looking for a place where he would be developed well. I think he valued the relationship part. He was looking for authenticity, and I think he found that at Boise State. And so it just checked so many different boxes. And now when I hear that Malachi is going to be the starting quarterback and he's going to be gone after this year, I'm like, I don't think he is, because I think he's already been to the place with the biggest logo in the Western United States in college football. I don't think he's just going to chase the next thing, because then now he's a quarterback, if he is draft worthy, that's gone to 3 schools in 3 years. And that,
Right.
if you looked at none of those quarterbacks that were drafted, I don't think any of them been to 3 schools. Dang,
Right.
you're
And it's been
been
a two,
two.
right? So yeah.
Drake May was one, and then just about every other one. Drake May and JJ McCarthy were one school, and then obviously everybody else I think had been to 2.
Right.
So I just don't think that's exactly what he's going to be looking for. I think Boise State's going to be a really good fit for him. I think Spencer's protecting him really well. I don't even think he's done a media availability yet, which I think is very intelligent, very wise. Just keep it about his process. Let him be a kid that's going to college and finding his way in a new place and away from his family for the first time, and just be about the ball, be about football, be about learning the system and growing. And instead of everything just being about, let's just charade this massive 5-star guy around and use his name, image, and likeness for our own brand to sell it to, sponsorships and all these other things. He's just allowing him to be a college football player that's trying to compete for a starting quarterback job.
Well, he's not the only guy in this class. This is the highest rated recruiting class in Boise State history and among current Mountain West teams in their history. This is a stacked class. This is one of the best wide receiver classes I've seen since 2007. 2007, of course, had Titus Young, Austin Pettis, Shoemaker. I mean, you got some great guys out of that, but you got Chris Marshall coming in from Texas A&M, or previously Texas A&M, and then JUCO, but the number 1 JUCO product in the country. Cam Camper from Indiana was their top wide receiver the last 2 years, dealt with some injuries. Cameron Bates looks really good. I mean, who else stands out to you in this recruiting class outside of the offensive, defensively, but just who stands out to you in this offensive recruiting class for Boise State?
Well, you mentioned a name there, Chris Marshall, and there's been a lot of history about maybe some off the field issues. I don't know all of it. I never pretend to know, but I think it's going to be really important for him to continue to get off on the best right foot. As he starts his career at Boise State. I don't think he went through spring ball in its entirety, if I'm not mistaken.
He played. He played in the spring game. I think that he initially started off a little bit limited, but he ended up playing the spring.
Yeah, and so obviously he's got the talent of somebody worthy of being a Texas A&M recruit. So he's got that type of ability. It'll be interesting to see how he kind of works into it. But the guy I'm really looking forward to is Sire Gaines. I think that Sire Gaines is a guy that will be. I think I haven't seen him in person, but just hearing from ball game and hearing from BJ, he's the kind of guy that I think is going to be fit into the running back room in a sense where Ashton Jeanty is really 1A, 1B, 1C. You could go all the way down the alphabet on his importance in that room, but you really want the one guy to be your every down back, your guy that's you can hand the ball off to on first and second down. If you need it on gotta have it third or fourth down, you got him on the field. But what you really want is your 2 to be the guy that's, kind of flashy, the pass catcher, the fly sweep guy, the movement player, your outside player. And I think they have that in Breezy Dubar. And so your 3 is the guy that you want to be a little bit more like your 1. And I think that Sire Gaines is going to be able to grow into that role. And I'm sure there's going to be competition and veteran players that are going to want to have their say in that. But I think that Sire Gaines and everything I've heard about him is that he will be developing into that type of caliber of player that can be an every down type of player. And I'm not saying Breezy Dubar can't be that. It's just that you like to use your 2 as a guy that can go make some plays and become a home run hitter, and do some things on the perimeter as a pass catcher, and a fly sweep runner.
He came in as an athlete. I think he was listed on Huddle as a wide receiver and running back, then also a safety. And then you look at his tape, he also kind of stepped down to that linebacker role. Like, he could have gone anywhere. Early enrollee, the coaching staff looked at him. They said, this is a guy that we're going to put into one of the most stacked running back rooms in the Mountain West. I mean, you talked about Ashton Jeanty, then you got Dubar. Dudley's got some good potential in him. Tyler Crow's a good power back. I mean, they have some good, this is a solid running back room. And they take a guy that they could have put anywhere on the roster, and they put him in the running back room. And that says a lot. And it has showed in the spring game. He led all purpose for offensive yards. He had 63 total yards in the spring game, 45 yards rushing, 18 yards receiving on 3 different receptions. This is a guy that, like you said, I am super excited about him and his potential. I think that Jean-Bray Dubar has probably got that second role locked up, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the running back preview. But this is a guy in Sire Gaines that you are going to see have a role in this offense, and he is going to have a role in the Boise State future as well. Maybe, like you said, he's got a little bit of Ashton Jeanty similarities. He could take over as that starting role. Well, let's move into officially breaking into this 2024 offense. So Boise State's offense 2024, they aren't the same offense that we saw in 2023. Eric McAllister, leading wide receiver for Boise State, over 800 yards receiving. He transfers out after the Fresno State game. And then Andy Avalos is fired after New Mexico. Spencer Danielson is elevated to the interim head coaching role, and they go 4-0. They win the Mountain West. They win the Mountain West, and they since Spencer Danielson gets announced as the head coach, but then Taylor Green announces he's hitting the portal. So now you're without your number one quarterback, your number one wide receiver from 2023, your number one quarterback. And again, there was a little bit of mix and match with the 2-quarterback system, but he was your main guy. And Helani's graduating, and he was your starter at the beginning of the year. So how many teams are sitting looking at their 2024 rosters, having lost their number one wide receiver, their number one quarterback throughout the majority of the season, and their starting running back at the beginning of the year, and yet are sitting there going, this could be the best year in our school history for offensive production? I mean, this is unheard of in college football.
Welcome to the portal era, because I think a lot of people are now saying that. I think it's just every team now is built for that season. I mean, that's the world you live in now. It's not, you have to change your thought process about how you look at from one year to the next. I mean, I went to the CU spring game today. I was at the spring game, and I actually had a roster cheat sheet out there, and I think there was only about 3 or 4 kids on the entire team that I had coached 2 years ago. I mean, there's 3 or 4 kids. And frankly, there were a ton of players. I watched every CU game last year, a ton of players that aren't there anymore. And then a whole new crop that came in. Welcome to college football, man. It's just, if you're a group of 5 school and you have an elite player, he's going to go to a Power 5 program typically, or if you have a guy that's, maybe didn't get the NIL money that he wants, he might go to another comparable school and get the NIL that he wanted to get at that place. So it's becoming so commonplace to have your leading receiver, your leading quarterback, your leading rusher, your leading sack, guy, to not be a part of your team and still have a chance to be really good. But the thing that I think is so different about Boise State, and we can get into it, is you got returners in the offensive line. You got returners, in the tight end group. And clearly the most important returner is the Heisman candidate and your running back.
And you said it, the most important guy, Ashton Jeanty. And you just said a few sentences ago that typically, especially as a group of 5 program, you have an elite next level guy, and he is gone. He has gone to some Power 5, $500,000 NIL contract. And Ashton Jeanty got an NIL deal. Really, really good one, plus $300,000. It comes with an apartment and a car upgrade and those kind of things. But it was below what other Power 5s were out there offering. And the reason that he stayed, the reason that so many of these guys stayed on the roster was because of who Boise State chose as their head coach, Spencer Danielson. This is offensive preview focus, but let's talk a little bit real quick about Spencer Danielson's elevation to head coach. Were you surprised at all by that move, or was that just kind of after the way things went, 4-0 Mountain West Championship, that was just the way that they were going to go, and it was the right one?
I wasn't surprised at all, because I think it was the right thing to do. I think it was the players in the locker room spoke with their play, and they backed up this vision that Spencer had of, being a relational builder of a program, a guy that cares about the people, cares about everything involved, with every player that's on the roster. And I think that they caught fire and they bought in. And I think that's exactly what happened. What I was surprised about is that, Jeremiah Dickey is not, he's not an athletic director that has been a Boise State lifer. So it's not like he didn't cut his teeth watching Boise State, in 1999 with Dirk Cutter, and then seeing it go to Chris Peterson, then seeing it go to Brian Harsin. Dan Hawkins obviously won a lot of games too, in between Harsin, in between Dirk and Pete. So I thought that there was a chance that, a young athletic director, younger, to the block, would want to go out and get his guy, from his background. And kudos to Jeremiah for for doing what's best for this football program and reading the room, reading the players, getting to know the players. I think that's why Jeremiah is so good and why he's going to be so successful is because he is a relational athletic director. He's a guy that wants to serve the people that he's entrusted with leading. And I think he made a great decision because he had already been boots on the ground to see kind of the team's transformation from when Spencer took over until the end of that season.
Well, Spencer Danielson wasn't the only coaching hire over this offseason. Boise State, you've got this great recruiting class. Ashton Jeanty's coming back. Everything looks set. And then Bush Hamdan gets a call from Kentucky. And it's the kind of call that you can't turn down, the kind of call you can't send to voicemail. And he leaves and he goes to Kentucky. And now Boise State does without an offensive coordinator. And there were a lot of names thrown around, maybe try and go get Kirby Moore, maybe try to go someone outside the coaching tree. And there were some crazy fans out there that were saying things like Dirk Cutter. And they were usually the same kind of fans. They were also throwing around like Kellen Moore. And it's like, there's no way. Dirk Cutter's retired. He came and he coached as offensive coordinator because his son was on the team. He was doing a favor. Like he said in interviews, he was doing it for his son and his son's friends. He's done. This is a former NFL head coach. This is a guy that is the most experienced for offensive coordinator in college football based on what he has done as a head coach and as a coordinator. And there was no way he was going to come back as a retiree and coach at Boise State. And then it was announced that Dirk Cutter had signed a one-year deal to come back and be the offensive coordinator for this season. Do you think this is a stepping stone thing where they're like, all right, we either have some guy outside the program that we'd like to go, but he's not ready to come, or we have some guys, you mentioned Potter, Matt Miller's on the team as well, that we would like to be developed. Can you come in and shepherd the program for this year while we either tread water for the next guy or develop the guys on the roster and then bring in the next guy? Or is this is where they wanted to go? And Dirk's going to say, like, if I have fun this year, I'll come back next year.
Well, I think it's a really good question. I think everybody wants to have a crystal ball, especially head coaches, and say, oh yeah, I'm going to bring in Dirk for a year and then we're going to win a bunch of games and everything's going to be good. And then Matt Miller or Nate Potter or Tim Keene or whoever is going to be the offensive coordinator. You don't know. You have no idea. The bottom line is if this season doesn't live up to the expectations, as a first-time head coach, you're not going to be able to just promote from within. Like that's not how it works. You have the ability to make decisions based off the success of your most recent season. And I've lived that life. I've been a head coach. I've had to make decisions, after a year, about taking over play calling duties myself. Those are the things that you do. You can't anticipate what's going to happen until you go through the year. So yes, while I think there are some logical possibilities to be groomed within the program to become the next offensive coordinator, you can't hold that crystal ball because bottom line is, if it doesn't go great this year, which there's a lot of hype surrounding it, I don't know how you can promote from within. I just don't think there's not a world that's not how college football works, where it's like, we weren't very good, so we're going to actually elevate somebody from within to make us better because and then everybody on the outside saying, well, why wouldn't you have used that person this year to make this year better? It just doesn't work that way. So it's going to be largely based on the success of the team, in my opinion.
Well, it's going to be a very, very interesting season, and it all starts with the quarterback position. So let's talk about the quarterback position for Boise State here. Obviously, we said Taylor Green, he's transferred to Arkansas. He's going to be their starter there. We're excited for his potential in his future. But then Boise State, the most experienced guy they have coming back is someone that right now is rehabilitating an injury in Maddox Matson. And then you bring in, that's where you're looking. Like before you go hit the transfer portal, you're looking at an injured Maddox Matson, CJ Tiller, who's played one game versus UCLA, and it was a very, very tough game to have to be your first start. And he showed some nice moments, but he also didn't look like the quarterback of the future in that one game. And then you got Colt Fulton and some, a couple other guys on the roster, but that's it. And then they bring in Malachi Nelson, this 5-star Power 5 transfer. And now you've got a legitimate quarterback battle here between Maddox Madison and everything that he did last year and all the experience that he brings and all of the potential that Malachi Nelson brings in with his stats and with his raw potential and his raw talent. So when you're looking at this quarterback room with Malachi Nelson and Maddox Madison, because CJ Tiller has transferred out, he realizes, I think there was a dark horse potential. I know you were really impressed by his maturity and his interview ability, and and kind of his decision making. I know that you were really impressed by him, but he saw the writing on the wall. Malachi Nelson's performance in the spring game was exceptional. I mean, what Malachi Nelson did in that spring game, he had passing wise, he had 9 of 16 for 137 yards and a touchdown, which included some absolutely incredible plays. I mean, he had one play to your guy from Colorado, Chase Penry, corner of the end zone, double coverage, and it was a tough play. I mean, he has to fake a handoff, roll out to the left, so all of his momentum's going to the left, and he has to set his feet and throw back to the right, left to right, and it was right where only his guy could get it. He had a couple of beautiful plays on the sideline. He was 20, 30-yard throws where good coverage again, but he gave Caples and Prince Strong, the only guys, the chance to actually go out and make those catches, and they did. So Malachi Nelson has one of the most impressive spring game performances ever for a Boise State quarterback. Is the quarterback competition over? Is Malachi Nelson, I mean, it's not been official or anything, but is he the guy, or is there still a competition here? Is Maddox Madsen going to get his shot, and does he have a shot of unseating Malachi Nelson in the fall?
I think there's absolutely still going to be a competition. And I think much to the chagrin of probably many Boise State fans, this is going to be a classic quarterback competition between the high ceiling guy versus the high floor guy. And the high ceiling guy is obviously Malachi Nelson. He's still a young player. He's a guy that hasn't really gone through a season of college football. Majority of the season at USC, he wasn't even practicing based off the reports and the people that I know in the USC's football program because of a shoulder injury.
Right.
And whatever else transpired at SC, I do not know, but he wasn't even really running scout team, let alone getting meaningful reps. So he's still a very young player. Still a developmental player, physically, he's still slightly built to a certain extent, needs to continue to put weight on. And then you got the high ceiling guy, the 5-star guy, and then you got the high floor guy, which is Maddox Madsen that, just has shown all the toughness, all the intangibles, all the leadership, the grit, the guy that does remind you of maybe your quintessential, Boise State quarterback vis-a-vis Grant Hedrick, a guy that might not be 6'3", might not have the NFL, acumen to be that's going to wow you at a combine with their arm talent, but has athleticism, has grit, can execute the offense at a very high level. And one thing that I think that people aren't putting enough stock in is that Maddox Madsen was in that quarterback room, and when Dirk Cutter was the offensive coordinator, play caller for the latter half of 2022, so he already knows and has a relationship with what Dirk Cutter and how Dirk likes to operate in a season, how he likes to call a game. And then Dirk conversely also has that familiarity with a guy like Maddox Madsen. Now, Maddox Madsen didn't have a chance to fully compete for this job in spring because of his rehab. Although I did hear he was essentially doing just about every single thing that you can do in practice without being in 11-on-11 live reps. So I think this is going to be a very stiff competition. I think it's going to be a hard decision. I don't think it's as easy as everybody thinks, but I think when you bring in a 5-star quarterback that has the ability and then goes out and does it in front of the fan base the first time they have a chance to see him, and does it, how can you temper the enthusiasm and the expectations of your constituents, which is your fan base, even if it is the best decision for your team to start Maddox Madsen? Well, we're going to find that out. Ultimately, really good coaches, I think they make the decisions that are best for their football team. And nowadays, coaches are coaching for their jobs every single year. Ultimately, that you're going to see Spencer Danielson make this decision because Dirk Cutter's going to be gone in 2025. A guy like Spencer Danielson's got to think about the long game, not just what's best for this football team, but what's best for the longevity of the program. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can look at that.
Everyone's just assuming right off the bat, Maddox Madsen, he's not even in the competition. Malachi Nelson is the starter. This is a guy that, as a freshman quarterback who has had no experience at all in this offense, being thrown into the toughest situations when the game is on the line, when the fan base doesn't want to see you out there because the game is already going poorly, went out and threw for 1,191 yards, had a 61.4% completion percentage, and threw 4 touchdowns, and put Boise State back into a position to win a lot of games. They didn't end up being able to close that last gap, but he got them within a possession on 3 games where they were completely out of it, and he gave them a chance to go out there and win. This is one of the fiercest competitors I have ever seen at Boise State. And because of his stature, because of, obviously his physical limitations, he's had to become more enrolled in the mental side of the game. This is a very, very smart football player. He feels the defense out there. You know, he kind of reaches out with that sixth sense and he feels where the DBs are. And yeah, he had a couple of, you know, freshman type moments because he was a true freshman out there throwing the ball, or freshman quarterback out there throwing the football around. And he still went out there and performed admirably at a high level. And who knows what would happen there towards the end of the season if he hadn't broken his leg, if he may have, you know, they would have had to made a choice one way or the other with Spencer Danielson coming up, and maybe Max Madsen would have been the guy to lead them to that Mountain West Championship game. Who knows, and where we would be sitting at conversation wise. But yeah, I mean, I've been out there saying, yeah, I love Malachi Nelson. I love everything that he brings. I love his potential. I love the fact what it would do for the school to have a freshman quarterback, former USC, former five-star guy starting for us. I love that from a, you know, propaganda perspective and what that would do to us on the national stage. But I also have to look at a guy like Malachi Nelson and his potential. And I think you have two of the best quarterbacks in the Mountain West this season. You know, maybe Fresno State's got a good claim to a good one there. But as far as top to bottom, two of the best quarterbacks in the Mountain West this season in a quarterback competition for the starting role of Boise State. And whoever wins, it's going to be strength versus strength. There's a lot of people out there saying, well, if Malachi Nelson loses the job, it's because he didn't live up to his potential. We just saw what he did in the spring game. We know what his potential is. If Malachi Nelson wins this job, it's because he earned it. It's because of his potential. It's because of his skills and his abilities that we're going to know that we're going to have one of the best quarterbacks in the Mountain West, regardless of which one of these guys ends up starting.
No, I agree with that. I think it's going to be a hard decision either way, because, you know, you almost feel like if you go the route of starting Malachi Nelson, you know, the expectation train is going to get massive, you know, and nobody's going to ever live up to expectations in their first 3-4 games of starting. Well, if it comes, you know, with a couple early loss, a loss that you shouldn't have, or, you know, a game that goes really sideways, and then you make the decision to change quarterbacks, you almost feel like you're back in 2023, you know, and that's the hard part about this. And these are things that you have to think about when you're making these decisions. Is you can't be back in a situation where you're playing two quarterbacks. That's the bottom line. You cannot, do not do it. But you have to pick a starter, and you have to lower the expectations by using the bully pulpit known as the media, and talk about the growth of a guy like Malachi, or talking about, like you said, about the fact that Malachi Madsen earned this job, because the fan base is not going to be very fired up. I mean, if we're talking real here, if you know, Georgia Southern and then Oregon, those games, and you rolling out Malachi Madsen, it's gonna be like, wait a minute, what happened? And that's a hard part. That's a hard part about it. And then, of course, the Malachi Madsen struggling early on in you know, any of the games. You know, you got the 5-star on the sideline. So, but you don't want to make that switch either. You know, you don't want to do it, because then you're back in 2023. So I think the key to it all, pick a quarterback that earned it and ride with him as long as you possibly can. That's the bottom line.
I really, really feel for Malachi Madsen, because I feel like he could have really put himself in a good spot in the spring. It's going to be tough to catch Nelson in the fall after the spring game. So I do think Nelson has the edge. But regardless, this is going to be a job that's earned. There's nothing assumed here. And the biggest point of all, the most important point, which leads us into the second part of this video talking about the running backs, is that it doesn't, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who the starting quarterback is, as long as you have stability at that position. Because this offense is not going to be built on the arm of a quarterback. This offense is going to be built on Ashton Jeanty. He is going to be the heart and soul of this offense. You got to have a quarterback. You got to have someone that can throw the ball. We're not going to be arming. We're not going to be running the ball every single play. So we're going to have a passing game. You got two talented wide receiver room not to use them. There is going to be a quarterback out there, and either of these guys can do that. But the primary role of any of these quarterbacks is going to be to facilitate the ball getting to hashtag Heisman mode Ashton Jeanty this season. And so at the end of the day, I'm excited for either of these guys to get the role, but what I'm really excited about is how they are going to work in tandem with Ashton Jeanty. And let's move into talking about the running backs here. Ashton Jeanty, the school is in full Heisman swing. They've got the shirts that are going out. They got the media post. They've got the Heisman with the hashtag, 2 right there in the middle. I mean, they are doing a full Heisman push. The last time I saw it, they've done only 2 times in my memory have they done a Heisman push for a player. They did it with Kellen Moore who finished, was it fourth in the ballots, fourth in the votings? And then they did it with Ian Johnson. They did it with Ian Johnson, and he finished just outside of the voting there. So there's only two other guys, and that is high levels. So you bring in Ian Johnson and Kellen Moore, and now you've got Ashton Jeanty, but he raises to that level. He's the number one show in town. They're naming snow plows after them. You've got NIL deals. Ashton Jeanty, Heisman campaign. Do you think he's got a chance? Can he go out and win the Heisman? Tough task as a group of five. Can he do it?
He absolutely can. And I think that especially in this coming year, because I think there's so many unknowns at the quarterback position. I think a lot of people even were making draft analysis for the 2024 draft based off the fact that the 25 class is a whole lot of unknowns. And I think there weren't as many unknowns going into the 24 class about how good the quarterbacks are. And I think that's how you win a Heisman Trophy at the running back position, is probably in the absence of a clear-cut quarterback at the position to win, to go win the Heisman Trophy. And that's where I do think that Ashton Jeanty, because of what he's already shown, the durability, the wow plays. I mean, his path to winning the Heisman Trophy is Boise State, maybe losing only one game or 0 games on their path to being in the CFP, the group of 5 representative for the CFP. And the game that's going to be really important is the Oregon game. And that's the bottom line, because that's going to be a Heisman moment. And he's got to show up and have a Heisman moment against Oregon in Eugene at Autzen Stadium. And he's got to be the guy that goes in and he shuts up one of the loudest crowds in all of college football. And if that happens and Boise State stays on the path towards a playoff contention and then ultimately secures a Mountain West championship en route to securing, the group of 5 representation for the CFP playoffs, I think you can win it. Absolutely.
Hey, it's been done before in the state of Oregon. Ian Johnson out there versus Oregon State, 5 touchdown running performance. Hey, move that stadium a little bit over. Ashton Jeanty, 2024, he could do it. It's been 1990. Ty Detmar, BYU, was the last group of 5 at the time rep to win the Heisman. There hasn't been a Heisman winner since 1990 in the group of 5. But this honestly, I mean, I'm not just talking as a fan right now. This feels the closest that I've ever seen since then of a group of 5 guy going out and winning it. I mean, Kellen Moore felt like he could have done it, but you knew there was just too much there. With the hype right now, he's being listed as one of the 5th best running backs in the country. There's a lot of, he was one of those top NIL guys, and that he's going to get the ball a lot this season. He feels like he has a chance to go out there and win that. With that expectation, do you think that this is a Ashton Jeanty first offense, like I was saying? Do you think that this is going to be a little bit more of that run focus that we thought we were going to see last year? Or do you think that Dirk Cutter brings back a little bit more of that bounce attack like Bush tried to start last year with? What do you see offensively for the run game here?
I think it is going to be a team that doesn't necessarily call itself an Ashton Jeanty first offense, but a team that's going to roll up into your stadium, and they're going to get off the bus and they're looking for a fist fight. And they're going to be the team that plays the more physical brand of football. It's going to be a trenches first type of football team. And I think that when you have that type of mindset, when you do it with multiple tight ends, which we'll get into, you have a experienced offensive line. You have guys with starts under their belt. I think that then you can dominate the line of scrimmage. And then, by the way, you got Ashton Jeanty creating all the magic, not at the line of scrimmage, because you got that taken care of. You got it at the second level, at the third level against open space tacklers that are linebackers and safeties. And he's already proven that he can do that at any stage. And frankly, he can do it better than anybody else in the country. And I really did believe that at the end of last season. I thought there was only maybe one running back that was playing at a higher level in college football, and it was Blake Corum. But even then, I mean, Blake Corum, he was nursing some injuries. He was banged up a little bit. Ashton Jeanty just seems to get better as the game goes on. Seems to get better as the season goes on. I mean, the guy is just an absolute workhorse. There's a reason there's a snowplow, because the guy he's a plow horse himself. And I think that's not going to change anytime soon because of how committed he is to the game of football, his offseason, how he takes care of his body. And back to the group of 5 Heisman conversation, I think it's a little bit different nowadays because a guy like Ashton Jeanty entered into the Power 5 discussion this offseason because of the NIL opportunities he had at places like Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M. He had those opportunities and he turned them down. So he had a different spotlight put on him than maybe even Ian Johnson did outside of proposing to his girlfriend after the Fiesta Bowl. And I think that's we live in a different space where now people don't view him as a group of 5 running back like Garrett Wolf was at Northern Illinois, where it's like, oh man, that's cute. Look what he's doing. He's a little guy. This is different. This is an NFL running back. This is a guy that was being actively recruited, even not in the portal, by teams that were offering him upwards of $500 to $1 million to come play for their programs.
When we talk about managing this run game, one of the most tricky things with offense this year, however, is going to be managing the talent on this wide receiver room. And it is a crazy switch from 2023 to 2024. 2023, you had Eric McAllister was the wide receiver show in town. He had 873 yards receiving. He was the number one guy. Nobody even came close to touching his receiver production. Prince Strawn, McAllister had 47 receptions for 873 yards. After that, you've got returning Prince Strawn, who's got 12 receptions for 274 yards. And then Austin Bolt, who's got 6 receptions for 174 yards. Out of your receivers returning, because you had some guys, Cobbs and Bowens depart. But out of guys returning, you went from Eric McAllister to Prince Strawn and Austin Bolt, who showed some potential, but maybe you weren't saying we got a real reliable receiver core here. And then the transfer portal started getting racked up. And now Boise State is sitting at a point where they have 2 guys coming back from injury in Latrell Caples and Chase Penry. You got 2 guys that showed a lot of potential in Prince Strawn and Austin Bolt. And then you went out and grabbed the number 1 JUCO product wide receiver in the country, former Texas A&M wide receiver in Marshall. And then you also went out and grabbed a Power 5 transfer from Indiana and Camper. And then you also got some other exciting guys coming out of high school. So this is going to be a incredibly deep wide receiver room. The most, and we haven't seen them perform yet, but when you're talking about potential expectations, on paper performance, on paper potential, this is the best wide receiver room I have ever seen at Boise State out of what they could potentially go out there and do. Can you talk to me a little bit about how do you manage a wide receiver room of this depth? I mean, who do you choose to go out there and be your number 1 guys? Is it just kind of who's had a great week of practice? Is it who's getting hot? Do you have an idea of like set places and you kind of see how it works out? Do you have it maybe a little bit more positionally, or whoever is on defense that week? I mean, how do you manage a wide receiver room this deep?
There's a quote in college football and pro football that I think is going to be very apropos with this wide receiver conundrum that you have, which is a great problem to have. And the quote is, the best ability is availability. And I think it's going to be really important when you think about 2 of the 3 receivers that you mentioned did have some physical limitations, had some season-ending injuries in Latrell Caples and Chase Penry, my guy from CU. And then you also have to think that Chris Marshall himself, his availability at Texas A&M wasn't there because of some off-the-field decision-making. And so I do think that it's going to naturally take care of itself with regards to who's going to be available to practice all fall camp, who's going to be available as the year goes on. And the guys that I think are going to be emerging are some of the staples. I think number 1, I think Prince Strawn is going to be the star of this receiver class. I saw it last year. He was young. He hasn't even played the game of football that long. Like, he is a raw receiver, but he is a Frisbee catching dog, man. Like, you put that ball up there, and you saw it in the spring game, one of Malachi Nelson's biggest plays that wasn't the touchdown pass to Chase Penry was to Prince Strawn down the sideline, and him fitting a ball in a 50-50 type of opportunity, and Prince Strawn being that guy that can do it. I think that Prince Strawn is going to be fantastic. And then another guy that I go back to my time in 2000 with Dirk Cutter as a play caller. And I remember Jeb Poutier. Jeb was a receiver, but a big receiver. And that's what I see in Austin Bolt. I think that Austin Bolt kind of plays as a flex Y, can be a slot, but a bigger slot, and also has shown the ability to blow the top off of coverage. And then I think Chase Penry, I had him at CU. I love him. He's the ultimate, just tough guy. He's a pro. He's battled a lot of stuff. He's gone through a lot to get to this point in his career where he's fully healthy. The catch that he made from Malachi Nelson in the corner of the end zone. When I saw that on Twitter, it brought a smile to my face just because I was a part of his journey. We had to shut him down. He had some surgical things that he went through, and we only had really a 4-game stretch that we could play him in that 2022 season. But he was just a total pro about it. So I think he's going to be a great slot receiver, a great chain mover on third downs. So I think you have a really good core there. And then it's just going to come down to Latrell Caples. How healthy is he? Is he going to be fully back? Is he fully healthy? Are there any setbacks when you do go through, either an ACL, MCL, meniscus? I don't know exactly what it was. Sometimes you do have some limitations. You get soft tissue issues as a result of that surgery. So his availability is going to be really important because, frankly, he was the best receiver coming out of the 22 season, going into 23 before the season-ending injury. So I think his availability is going to be of the utmost importance. And then how quickly does Marshall just catch on? And how consistent is he going to be? Is he going to be an awesome locker room guy? Is he going to be a pro at practice? Because this program it's all about what's earned. It's not going to be given. And just because he was a 5-star going to Texas A&M and he was the #1 JUCO recruit in the country, if he's not holding up his end of the bargain, and I'm not saying he is or isn't, I'm not there, then ultimately I think it'll take care of itself. But I think it's a great problem to have because what I just named was a whole bunch of guys. And even if there is some issues with health, or even if there is an off the field issue, you got a lot of options. And that's a spot that I don't think Boise State found itself in a year ago at this time.
When you name some of those guys out there, like Austin Bolt, he's coming back from his own injury. I mean, he was limited last year, and pretty much they were like, okay, you can run it, you can just run a go, but you're not making any breaking routes. I mean, he was still walking around with like crutches and stuff, like when he was off the field. Like, this is not a guy that's 100%. And he still had 175 yards receiving, average 29.2 yards per catch. So I think what you're probably going to see out of this receiver core, with all these new guys coming back, with some guys coming back from injury, is you're probably going to see a few guys at the beginning of the year that you're #1s, and then towards the end of the year, you're going to see some newer guys stepping up in that #1 role. I think early on, Caples looks really, really good coming back. I think he looks like he's 100%. He's had a full almost year and a half, 2 years at this point to come back, because he hurt it in camp last year. So he's had a full off-season to recover from that, year and a half to recover from that leg injury. He looked really, really good in training, looked really, really good in spring ball, in the spring game, and playing from that likely slot role. He's going to be that easy out. He's going to be that easy dump off pass. Go make me some yards after catch. And for these guys, whoever it is, neither of them are very experienced. Max Manson's the most experienced, but he's not extremely experienced. Both of them are going to be looking for that confidence booster, that easy pass opportunity. But then as they build their confidence, they build their chemistry with these other guys coming through, when they start pushing that deep ball, that's when I think Prince Strong, I think you're right. Prince Strong right now, especially if the starting quarterback is Nelson, they look right now, from what has come out of spring training, what we saw in the spring game, they look to have this chemistry. Like, I mean, I think at one point, I don't remember if it was BJ Rains or somebody on the Bronco Nation news show, they were saying, like, he's that guy that there's that chemistry, and Nelson just throws the ball out there. He's like, I know you're going to go get it. If maybe it's not someone I'll throw a ball to every day in that position, but if Prince is my guy, I'm going to throw it up and let him go give an opportunity. I think that Strong is going to be that #1. I think Capel starts off early as that #1, but then eventually I think that you start seeing Marshall start to really rise up in this offense as he starts to establish himself, and then Camper as well, if he can come back from his injuries. I think both those guys are going to have a major role in the back end. The one guy that I see being a consistent role no matter what throughout this whole year is Chase Penry. I absolutely love Chase Penry. He was one of the guys I was really excited about last year. I watched his highlights from Colorado. I was really excited about his potential. Unfortunately, got injured last year. But he reminds me of like Vinny Peretta. Like, he is Vinny Peretta. Like, he's a guy that is a possession guy, but who can do it all. I mean, we even saw him in the spring game there. They threw a pass back to him, and he was looking to throw that ball forward. So, like, he is going to be that consistent, jack of all trades wide receiver, that guy you're looking for on third down. I'm really, really, really excited about Penry and the rest of this offense.
Yeah, I got big Penry energy, man. Everybody said big Penix energy at Washington. Chase Penry is a unique player because when fully healthy, and I didn't ever have a chance to get to coach him fully healthy, either in the spring leading up to 2022 or the season, but I watched his 21 film, and when fully healthy, he has real speed. He's a guy that can go get it. He has I think shockingly, because he's not a huge he's not a huge body type, but he's got tremendous catch radius. And I think that's going to be really important when you're breaking in a semi-inexperienced wide receiver or a quarterback group, that you have somebody that, is going to be able to make those either contested catches or the slightly inaccurate throws. Chase Penry has great abilities to track the football and catch it, going full speed on the back hip. He can very easily open his back hip, make those tough catches. He's got a great catch radius for a guy that's not necessarily 6'3". He's not small, but he's not a big imposing figure at the receiver position.
Well, and apparently he can throw the ball too, because they were looking to do that with him in the spring game. So I'm excited. It's been, you talk about when you were saying what's a successful job for me as an offensive coordinator at Boise State was having those trick plays. Boise State last few years, they haven't been really digging deep into that trick play playbook. Dirk Cutter looks like he might be bringing that back, and Chase Penry might be part of that. Talk about going back to the traditional Boise State roots, bringing back those traditional formations and traditional focuses. Is this the year that Boise State reestablishes the tight end? Matt Lauder is an absolute force. You got such a high star wide receiver room, just drawing a lot of focus. But Matt Lauder, quietly underneath, is having a heck of a spring ball. He had a great season last year. Last year, he had receiving 157 yards receiving, 17.4 yard average, 3 touchdowns, long of 59. The last time Boise State had a 400 plus yard receiver was in 2017 with Jake Rowe. Is this the year that they reestablish the tight end at Boise State?
It absolutely needs to be. And I think what has happened in college football, and I even noticed it watching the draft, and especially the tight ends that were coming off the draft in day 3, is like a guy like Theo Johnson at Penn State. You looked at him, he's an absolute freak. He's a unit of a player. But because of the advent of the RPO, a lot of people are playing 11 personnel football, and the tight end is involved in the run scheme, and the receivers, the slot, the outside receivers are involved in the RPO. So a lot of times you're getting these tight ends that are incredibly gifted pass catchers, but the systems themselves, this new RPO world, has really taken away tight end production. And I think that's what's happened at Boise State. I think it happened in 2021 a little bit, 22, a tiny bit last year. And I think Matt Lauder is going to be the perfect guy to do that. I do have real concerns myself about the depth of the tight end room.
That is a major, major question for this season. Offensive line looks really good. 4 out of 5 guys coming back. They recruited some good offensive linemen, some JUCO guys that can come in and fill roles right away. The wide receiver room looks really good. When you talk about one position group on this team, you got one of the best running backs in the country. One of the fiercest quarterback competitions is going to produce an absolute star in the quarterback room. Super deep wide receiver, really, really solid offensive line. Just one guy you've got to replace there and build a little bit of depth. Tight end, Lauder looks great, but who's going to be behind him? I honestly don't know right now, and it's going to be something that I think is going to be answered in season, because I don't think we're even going to get answers out of fall camp.
Jacob, why I think this is so stinking important is because we talked about establishing this team as being Ashton Jeanty in the trenches. This is your identity. Well, if you're playing with either 4 wide receivers on the field at a time or 3 and 1 tight end, a lot of times the defense can dictate whether you throw the ball against that look or you hand the football off to Ashton Jeanty. The great equalizer is when you get big and when you bring in extra bodies that are big bodies that can block. And I think that's always been a staple of this program, is playing in 12 and 13 personnel, 1 back, 2 or 3 tight ends. That's how you call 12 and 13. I think that's going to be a big part of the style of leaning into the trenches. And that's why I think that a portal tight end could be an answer. The problem is that portal tight ends, man, there aren't many of them. That's a position that just doesn't grow on trees. That's why, you look at these guys in the National Football League, the NFC and AFC championship. There were obviously great quarterbacks playing in those games, but there were unbelievable tight ends. And once you get one, you hold on to them for dear life. And that's exactly what's going on in college football.
There is one guy from this recruiting class. He dealt with injuries in 2023, so I don't know any insider information how 100% up he is. But Caden Anderson, 6'4", 225-pound guy out of Arizona. He had a recruiting from Air Force and Army, so you know that if he's going to fit into their scheme from a blocking perspective, he can definitely come down here for Boise State. He's an obvious receiving threat. He lined up at wideout sometime, a little bit more of that kind of Jeb Coutier kind of role, kind of switching back and forth between tight end and wide receiver. Very, very smart player from his scheme. He played in a very, very complex offense that had a lot of screens and fakes. So if you're looking at a high school guy that could come in and have a role right away in both maybe a blocking and receiving role, high school, it's hard to make that jump from high school to being in tight end when you've got to deal with the run blocks and everything else that comes into that picture. But here's a guy that maybe could fill a role right away. All right, so wrapping up here with our keys to the season for Boise State. All right, so number one key for me, and this should be obvious. This shouldn't even have to be a key, but I'm going to make it one because of what happened last year with where you had an offense that should have been doing this the whole time, and they came out and really didn't discover that that was what they were going to be focusing on as a strength until later this season. And it's make the run game your focus. That is my number one key. You've got Jeanty, who is going to, this is Jeanty's year. I mean, there's so much hype around him, and it's deservedly so. Deservedly so. This is going to be one of the best running backs that we see coming out of this Boise State program. And in a program that has produced incredible running backs, you have a full stable back there, though, that can also support him, help tout the load. You've got a really solid offensive line. You got to replace one guy, but overall, they're coming back strong. And at the same time, you've got weaknesses here that are inexperienced, that need to have time to develop. You don't want them having to shoulder that role right off the bat. Quarterback is going to be good, but it's going to take him time to learn that awareness, whether it's Maddox or it's Nelson. You've got a wide receiver room that has a ton of potential, but also they're going to maybe take a little bit of time to recover fully from their injuries and be 100%, and also to develop that chemistry in the passing game. So number one focus for me is you've got to make the run game the focus. I'm not saying this has got to be, New Mexico style, power ball out there, where you're lining up in the what do you call that? The pistol. I'm not saying that that's what you've got to run for this team. Balanced attack, but the running game should be taking about 60% of this offense, at least early on, until the wide receiver quarterback room can gel later in the year.
Yeah, I think that the mentality, I wouldn't say you said the running game needs to be the focus. I think the running game doesn't necessarily need to be the focus. It needs to be the identity.
Right.
And I think the identity of your team, that that you're going to be in a fist fight when you play Boise State. You better buckle up your chin strap because you're in for a long one. That's got to be from game 1 until game 15 or however many games they play now, 16, 7. I don't know, with all the different CFP. I haven't done the math yet, but you got to be that team and you got to be that identity, and you got the right people to do it. I agree 100%. That the run game and Ashton Jeanty and this offensive line. I love the quote from Jim Harbaugh when he drafted Joe Alt first, is that offensive linemen are weapons. Like he was asked, why didn't you draft a weapon? I did. His name's Joe Alt. He's an offensive lineman. He's a weapon. For this team, for this Boise State team, that group of 5 is a weapon. Plus Matt Lauder, plus Ashton Jeanty, plus Tyler Crow, maybe as a fullback. Like, that's a weapon because it's different. I mean, it's different. The way you come off the football, the way you tote the rock. And frankly, I think that you have your identity built on is early on, man. It's body blow, it's body blow, it's body blow, and then it's knockout. And that's what you got. That's a style of ball that you got to play. We did it at Sanford. We did it incredibly well. And we took down one of the best empires in football in the SC, the first round when Pete Carroll was there. And then the second round, it was the Oregon Empire with Chip Kelly and all this tempo. And we just took it down because we were the more physical team. In the game of football, the most physical team wins. There's a reason why, frankly, as good of a coach as Lincoln Riley is, and as good of a coach as, Mike Leach was in the air raid, there's a reason those guys have never won national championships or really haven't won many conference championships, because championships are won in the trenches. And that's how you win. The most physical team ultimately is going to win.
Well, leading off of that key, my second key is allow your quarterbacks to grow into the role. And I think this is for the coaches, but it's also for the fans. You talked about those expectations coming in and how crushing that can be for a quarterback. The last thing you want to do is for them to shatter their confidence early on. They need time to grow into this role. And it's tough when you've got Georgia Southern, nice little bit of a warm-up game. I mean, they're not like a guaranteed win out there. I mean, playing in the Sun Belt.
You better be ready, man. You better be ready.
You've got to be ready to play Georgia Southern. They're going to be a tough brand of football. They're not just somebody you can roll through. But you don't have to face a Power 5 right off the bat. But then you have to go play Oregon in your second game, and that is going to be so tough. So for my key for this is for the fans and it's for the coaches is allow the quarterbacks to grow into the role, build up slowly, expect growing pains. I mean, call the offense that fits the strength of this team, a little identity, like you said, the running game, a passing game that allows the quarterbacks to get a lot of focus on the tight ends, screen passage to the running back, short stuff to the wide receivers, get some yards after catch, allow them to build confidence in themselves. When you got a game time situation, you got it on the line, you got to go out and throw. You go out and throw. You do what you need to do to win, but don't be going out there throwing all over the board. I think that really hurt this team last year going up against Washington. It really put them on a back footing where if they come out and been able to establish themselves in that running game, they might have had a little bit of a different trend to that season, but they come out versus Washington and they're trying to throw the ball around. And it's not really working. And it just, from that point on, Taylor Green didn't look like the quarterback from 2023. He looked like a very different product. And I think it got in his head early on and it just trended in the opposite direction. So whatever you do, don't shatter their confidence early. Allow them to grow into this role and expect that there's going to be toe dragging, and it's going to take some friction to get these guys off the ground to the capability of what this wide receiver room and quarterback room can produce.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that you got to let them grow into the role, and you can do that in two ways. And I think the way you do that is, you identify yourself as you're a physical ground and pound. We got the best running back in the country, and we got the best offensive line by far in Group of 5 football. So build your pass game around your run game. So your nakeds, your bootlegs, those are easy completions. Whoever the quarterback is, moving the pocket, off the play fakes and the tendencies that you build up off of the run game. I think that's going to be a tremendous key to their success, to getting the confidence built up and actually getting some easy completions, because the defenses, like I said, are going to sell out against particular heavy run looks or heavy run tendencies in their formations. So build your pass game early on off of your run game. Don't have two different worlds. Like you're a drop back team and then you're just handing the ball off to Ashton Jeanty. And I think last year there were times it did feel a bit like that. And then I think the other part of that twofold, letting the quarterback grow into it, is that build it all around what your quarterback does well.
Right.
And I think Dirk he's already proven that he's done that throughout his career. But in particular, what he did in the 22 season with Taylor Green is he showed that he can build this offense and the identity of the offense around the skill set of the quarterback, which ultimately leads to a confident quarterback as you get into some of those tougher games.
Well, my third key builds off of my second one. It's something I kind of mentioned when talking about that second, but I think it deserves to be restated because of how star-studded and deep this wide receiver room is, because of the potential of the quarterbacks, honestly, especially if it's Nelson out there. We've seen what he can do with that pinpoint deep ball. The fans are hungry to get the deep passing ball back into the game, and we saw it kind of picking up with Austin Bolt and Prince Strong. We've got some real go-getters out there. You run them on a go route, no one's catching them. But I think this number 3 key is really, really important, is don't forget about the tight ends and the running backs in this passing game. This is a very, very, very exciting wide receiver room, but there are a bunch of young quarterbacks out here. And what I thought Maddox Messon did really, really well, what differentiated him a little bit from Taylor Green, is he didn't tend to force the ball into this. There was a couple times he did, but he didn't tend to force the ball. He tended to take what the defense is giving him. Roddy Smith was a heavy target for him in that tight end. The out route, those swing pass to Ashton Jeanty was a heavy focus for him when he was on the field. And he really allowed the defense to dictate where his passes were going to go based on what they were giving up to him on the field. So for me, with a young quarterback group, when you are trying to build up that confidence, yes, you got to use those wide receivers, and they're going to be an exciting part of this game. But the tight ends and running backs, I think, are going to be – you've got an incredible pass-catching back in Ashton Jeanty. Sire Gaines has shown what he's able to do. And then you got Matt Lauder. You've got to use those tight ends and running backs, especially as a young quarterback. Don't be necessarily going and looking for the big highlight reel play. Take what's given to you, especially early on, until you've built this chemistry later on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that part of it. And I think that you got to look at your tight end. That's the quarterback's best friend. He's always there for you in a pinch, like a can of Skoal tobacco. I mean, that's what the tight end position's got to be, and sometimes when you're trying to force balls into tight windows and it's just not going outside very well, or you're not getting the separation or the coverage, it's forcing you to throw balls that you don't feel comfortable throwing. Guess who's usually not covered? Your tight end. And then the other piece of the puzzle is this is a Chris Peterson line that I heard a million times over my career playing under Coach Pete is, when you're looking for those downfield shots, it's either got to be touchdown or check down. and just be totally okay with either result. Touchdowns there, throw the touchdown. You know, you got the coverage, you got the look, you got the matchup. Throw the touchdown. It's not there. Cool. Check it down. Guess who you're checking it down to? An unbelievable running back who's probably going to get you some yards that you threw the simplest pass. It's literally checkdowns are the warm up that you have when you first show up to the stadium or the first practice throw that you have. It's a 10-yard throw. You 5 yards by the line of scrimmage, 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. That's exactly what the checkdown is. So touchdowns and checkdowns. And don't forget the tight end is a quarterback's best friend.
This is a great Boise State team. I'm so excited about this offense. This is going to be one of the best running back rooms that we've seen in forever. And this is going to be one of the highest potential receiving and passing game quarterbacks and wide receiver / tight end rooms that we have ever seen for Boise State. It's just got to see, can that potential, can it come together in chemistry? Can the right quarterback get picked coming out of fall camp? And can they build their way up from a rough start to the year where you got to play Oregon right off the bat? Can they get through that and build towards something greater on the back end? This is going to be a heck of a season to watch this year.
Yeah, don't sleep on Georgia Southern. I'm just telling you, man. Statesboro, Georgia, it's gonna be as hot as you can imagine. That place, you think that Boise loves their local football team. Statesboro, Georgia, is the only thing going down there, and it's a real thing, and I mean that. That's gonna be one of those games Boise State fans expect. That you're just gonna walk in there, or if the team expects it's Georgia Southern. They've had some good teams recently, tough teams. Clay Helton does a great job there. He's a great head coach. He's been through a lot. He's been the highs of the high, and now he's at Georgia Southern, found his niche. That's gonna be a dogfight, and you better buckle up your chin strap and be the most physical team when you go and play Georgia Southern. And that's not coach speak. That's real. That's gonna be a big time challenge right off the bat.
Yeah, this was a great discussion. Thank you so much for coming on and being part of this. This is a great preview. We've got the Boise State special teams preview will be coming out sometime the next few months. Kyle Brotzman cannot wait to get down and preview the Boise State special teams, which, the defense had a lot of exciting things to talk about with JL Skinner and Hunter White. Definitely make sure you go back and watch that. The offense we just talked about for, I think we're going on close to 2 hours. We just really hammered away at this offense, and there was so much to talk about. It was a great discussion. But while the offense is exciting, we've got two of the best special teamers in the entire country on this roster, and James Ferguson Reynolds and Jonah Dalmas, and I cannot wait to break down our special teams potential this year with the best to ever do it, combined punting and kicking at Boise State, Kyle Brotzman. So thank you so much for coming on and doing this and breaking away from your busy schedule. This was a fantastic discussion. I was really, really looking forward to it, and it lived up to all the hype. So thanks so much for coming on and being part of this. Thanks, everybody, for sticking all the way through to the end. I hope you've enjoyed being part of this discussion. Absolutely make sure that you guys are subscribing to Bronco Nation News on their YouTube, which is free, but also their paid subscription gives you access to so much more great Bronco Nation News content, and making sure that you're catching all of the Bronco Nation News stuff in general, but also Mike Sanford and ball game stuff throughout the whole season. Their Ball Talk show is absolutely incredible, and it's just this every single week, and it's an absolutely amazing show. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for staying all the way to the end. And like I said, Mike, thanks for being part of this discussion.
No, it's been a whole lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this season. There's a lot of different storylines. It's going to be a really fun offseason. But really, I'm just excited to watch the game against Georgia Southern. Not sure what TV stations can be on. I'll find ESPN the Ocho if I have to, but I'm going to be watching that game just like everybody else in Bronco Nation. It's going to be a blast in the journey of 2024. I believe it's going to go into 2025 with some serious postseason, some serious postseason action that Boise State hasn't had in a long time.
That's right. We're headed for the Mountain West Championship game. We're headed for a CFP, and we're headed for a hashtag Heisman this year for Ashton Jeanty. So thank you, everybody, for being part of this. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. I want to go through and read through all your expectations and thoughts and what you thought about this video and what your own unique perspective is on the season. So thank you so much, everybody, for being all the way through. Like I said, Mike, thanks so much for being part of this. And as always on this channel, go, Ben, boom.